Hello and welcome. I'm Tony Kay. I work for Red Hat, and today what I want to do is a very simple first deploy with Ansible Agnostic Deployer or AgnosticD. What we're going to do is we're going to use a Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8.2 machine. It's very lightly configured, so we'll set up the toolchain. We will clone the AgnosticD repo, and we will do a deploy using what is known as the test empty config, which actually runs through all the cloud deployer steps without actually creating instances or VMs. In a later screencast, we'll look at deploying to both AWS and to OpenStack. Okay, let's get started. What I have here is a Vagrant box. It's RHEL 8.2. It's very lightly configured. So the first step will be to SSH onto this and set up the toolchain. So we need three things. Python 3 may well be installed. What we're going to do here is we're going to install Python, Ansible, and Git. I'm not going to talk about Python in depth. I'm going to make a separate screencast discussing how to set up Python 3, and then at a later date we're going to far more depth about how we can use virtual environments. But here we're going for a very straightforward install. So let's install the key parts of the toolchain. I'm going to use DNF. We need Ansible, we need Git, and we need Python 3. So I'm actually using Red Hat Network, and anybody is entitled to a free developer subscription. You can find that at Google, you can find that on the developer Red Hat sites. You could use EPEL for this, and if you're using Fedora or CentOS, all this should work exactly the same way. Okay, so now we have the toolchain installed, and what I want to quickly do is type Ansible -- version just to see which version of Python we're picking up. I strongly recommend Python 3, but as I say, that's a topic for another day. Okay, so we have everything we need. Okay, so next we need the repo itself, AgnosticD. It's on GitHub. I'll put the link in the show notes. So over here at AgnosticD, it's part of the Red Hat community of practice. We click the clone button. It's very simple. github.com redhat_scop agnosticd.git. So we select that. Git clone. Okay, so now we have it. So exploring the AgnosticD repo is definitely a topic for another day, but let's get started. So we cd into AgnosticD and the Ansible subdirectory. If we look here, we'll see a number of playbooks, including main.yaml. This is our main entry point, and also our configs. And the config that we care about today is called test empty config. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't actually deploy any VMs or instances, but what it actually does, it goes through the sequence of playbooks and roles that would be used in a normal deploy, and it's a very good way of checking that your AgnosticD and your toolchain is in place. In another episode, we will talk about configs in far more depth. But what we're going to do today is we're going to deploy a config called the test empty config, and it uses a vars file which we pass to Ansible as extra vars. I'm going to assume that you have at least a basic working knowledge of Ansible. So let's have a quick look at this. Configs, test empty config, it'll be called sample vars, and quite often there are several sample vars file. There might be one for OpenStack or Amazon, Azure, for example. In this case, we're just using this one, which is, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't actually create any incidents. So we have that. So the command is Ansible playbook main.yaml -E for extra vars, we're going to use the @ symbol. And what the @ symbol does is, instead of using -E to pass an individual var like foo equals var, we're actually going to pass the entire file. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to copy and paste that for simplicity. And there you have it. There's the command. And this is a very common pattern. We'll talk about secrets later, but very typically what we do is we pass two variable files, one which actually customizes the config, and the second one passes any confidential data. So that gives us good separation of concerns, and we're able to share those. I don't plan to talk through all of this when we do the config screencast. We will talk in depth about what actually happened and the 6 stages and the 2 phases of deployment. But as you see, we now have successfully shown that AgnosticD Ansible is set up correctly. So as this series develops, we're going to explore AgnosticD in more and more depth. So in future episodes, we're going to look at setting up your workstation, your laptop, setting up RHEL 8 again in more depth, RHEL 7, Mac OS. We're not really going to look at setting up Windows, though if you use the embedded runtimes, a lot of what we cover should just work. So thank you very much.